Hello and welcome back everyone. This week's mystery surprise bag is Frida Kahlo themed. I'm so excited for this one. We are honoring the great Frida Kahlo with our very own Frida Cathlo. So cute. So we are going to go step by step together today to recreate this beautiful Frida Cathlo. As we go along, feel free to change up any of the colors on the fur, on the clothes, on the flowers as we go. I'm going to follow along this example here on mine, but again, if you want to change up the colors on yours, definitely can. Let's take a look at our supplies real quick. So as always, our canvas is wrapped in the brown paper. So let's put that underneath our canvases so that we just get our paper painting and not anything else. We also have our little water cup. Let's fill that up with a little bit of water so we can wash off our brushes. And we have our paper towels so that we can dry off our brushes. Speaking of brushes, we have three. We have a large brush. That one's going to be this angle brush. We have this medium brush. That's going to be this kind of square bristled one. And then we have a small brush. That's going to be our small little round brush. It's going to be good for little details. We're going to start with our big brush. Let's also take a look at our paints here. We can take off that top plate. We have 9 colors. I included all the ones here that I have on my example. So let's put those on that empty plate to make our little palette plate. So let's put that all out on our empty plate over here. So I have some brown, yellow, red, black, dark blue, kind of tealy green, white, pink, and that's my purple. So we're gonna start with our background color. I'm gonna find my biggest brush and give it a little dip in the water, get things flowing. We're gonna tap on the paper so it's not all drippy. And we're going to mix up our background color. So I'm going to find my tealy green and my white. I'm going to scoot over some of my white and grab a little of my tealy green, just a little bit at a time. And we're going to do little mixes, little mixes. Going to mix them together to get a color that you like. So I'm going to use this color and I'm going to fill in all of my background. You can go over your Frida Cathlo name. I'm going to try to go around my flowers as much as I can. Take it nice and slow. You can go over these guys. Those are kind of a little too much trouble than they're worth to get around. So we'll just cover them up and we're going to put those little white flowers on top. So that'll go over nice and smooth. I'm going to try to get around these little leaves. You can go over little stems though. Smooth out your paint. And whenever you need to squeeze your brush kind of in between a tough spot, instead of a flat brush, turn it and use that thin part of the brush, and that's going to help go right in between any tricky spots. Maybe like that one. We're going to fill in all of our background. at the very, very bottom, kind of underneath her cloak, I'm gonna give it a little bit of a curve. And then I'm gonna fill in underneath. Just to kind of round it out. I'm gonna fill in everything underneath. And then I'm also going to wrap it around and paint my side edges to match. Okay, so once you have all of your background filled in, you have all your side edges, top, bottom, side, side, we're going to wash off our brush all the way down to the very, very bottom of that cup. Give it a good scrub. Dry it off on your paper towel. And our next color decision is going to be, what color fur is Miss Frida Cathlo gonna be? I did a really pretty dark blue. You could also do the dark purple would be really pretty. Mixture of the tealy green and the blue would be pretty. Brown would be nice. Also, combination of brown and blue. So think about it, try a little bit, see what you think. I'm gonna get a little bit of dark blue just by itself. And I'm going to take it really slow. There's some little spots in this one. I still have my big brush though. You can definitely use that smaller brush if you need it. I'm gonna fill in all the little face. I'm gonna go around the nose, but over the mouth. I'm gonna go around the eyes, around the cheeks, but over the whiskers. I'm going to try to squeeze my brush into those little places in between my leaves and my petals that are overlapping on top of the face. I'm going to go around my eyebrows, but I'm not too worried if a little bit gets in there because I'm going to put them back in black paint. That's going to cover right on over. So I'm gonna go around the eyes, around the eyebrows, take it nice and slow. Okay, so we have our fur filled in. I'm gonna wash off my big brush again, all the way down at the very, very bottom of my cup. Dry off your brush, both sides. And we are going to fill in the main color of our cloak or our scarf, our shawl next. I'm going to do mine a red to start, and then I'm going to show you how to kind of give a little shadow on the edges there to give it that nice round shape that she has. So I'm going to, again, I washed off my brush, I dried off my brush. I'm going to go into red, just red by itself. And I'm going to take it nice and slow around those little flowers. Use that little point of the brush is really handy to kind of squeeze into those tiny little points. And really take it slow on this one. There's no rush. If you need to go to one of those smaller brushes, go for it though. They're there if you need them. Okay, so we got that on there. Make sure you smooth out any little bits. Now we are going to switch brushes. So I'm going to put that large brush into my water. I'm going to find my medium brush next. That one has kind of a little square bristle to it. And I'm going to put that little bit of shadow in there. And I'm going to do that with purple. So I know that kind of looks a little dark, but that one's going to be my purple. There, you can see that a little bit better. I'm just going to grab a little bit of purple on my brush, and I'm going to start off by kind of almost tracing that edge. I'm using kind of the edge of my brush instead of a flat brush. I'm turning it and using the edge. I'm going to trace it, and then I'm going to scratch that color that I added on into my red. So I didn't do any new paint. I just used that little bit of purple that I swept on the edge, and then I'm going to kind of swoosh, swoosh, swoosh it into my red. And that's going to give me a little bit more shadow, like that. You can do that again, so add more, but start a little closer to the edge and then move it into the red. Little at a time, kind of go around those little flowers, and it's okay if you see a lot of those brush strokes. I think that gives it this really nice kind of almost velvety texture. That's really cool. So embrace those little brush strokes. Those are nice in there. We can always let this dry and do that a little bit more if it's blending a lot. I'm going to do that on the other side also. So I'm going to get a little bit of purple. This side's a little bit trickier because there's a couple of those flowers right on the edge there. I'll kind of skip over them, but do the same thing. I'm sweeping a little bit of purple right on the edge, and then I'm going to grab that little bit of purple and I'm going to kind of swoosh it on in. So I want the edge of my shawl to be a little darker and then still kind of nice bright red in the very middle. Do that a little bit all over. Go around those little petals. There we are. Beautiful. It looks really cool. Okay, while we have purple on our brush, on this medium brush, I'm going to get a little bit more, and I'm going to add that on to this little center, like piping or stripe, the little ribbon, maybe, on the center of the shawl. Let's sweep that on, we'll let it dry all the way. So we're going to wash off this brush. And we're going to dry off our brush, and we are going to fill in some petal colors. So on my flowers here, I have some pinks, I have some purples, I have some white. We'll let those dry a little bit and then put a little bit more color on top. Just give it a little bit more definition, texture, petally-ness to it. So I'm going to mix up a light pink first. So on my mixing plate over here on my palette of paint, I'm going to get a little bit of white. I'm going to scoot a little pink into it, whichever spot you have. And do little mixes. So it's a nice light pink that I like. Scratch off your brush when you're done mixing. Take off all that extra paint you don't need. Just leave what you have. And I'm going to follow along this example here, kind of which color goes where, but you can definitely do this color different spots too. Or if you really like pink flowers, you just want a full crown of beautiful pink flowers, that is awesome. Go for it. I'm going to fill in this one here. I'm also going to fill in this bottom part of this flower. And then this flower here. Beautiful. While I have that light pink on my brush, I'm also going to fill in my cheeks. If you want to put a little pink on that nose, you can definitely do that also. Painting over those little whiskers where the cheeks are. That's okay, we'll put them back later. And then we're going to wash off our brush. So I'm going to fill in my purple flowers next. I washed off my brush, I dried off my brush. I'm going to fill in this flower and this flower with purple. I'm also going to fill in that center kind of daisy flower. So I'm going to wash off my brush really well this time because we're going into some white paint. And I'm going to find a little bit of white wherever I have it. I'm going to grab a little bit there. Same medium brush. And I'm going to fill in my petals. And I'm just doing white paint. You can definitely do a different color. So we're gonna let those dry a little bit, and while we have a little bit of white on our brush, I'm gonna get a little bit of that white, and I'm just gonna fill in the whites of the eyes. If you wanna use your smaller brush for that, that's okay. Use that smaller brush, and I'm just gonna fill in the whites of the eyes, just so everything is covered in paint. We'll let that dry a little while. Don't worry if a little gets in the center or on a black line. We're gonna go over that later, all in black paint. Next up is our leaf colors. So we're gonna fill in all of our little leaves, kind of peeking through all those guys. The colors that I'm going to mix for that, I'm going to get mostly yellow, and just a little bit of that tealy green, that kind of dark green, and I'm gonna mix it in. It's gonna make this really cool, funky, almost avocado green. Gonna mix it all together. Scratch off your brush, take off all that extra paint that you may not need. Just leave what you do. And I'm gonna fill in all these leaves. Later on, we'll let this dry a little bit, and then we'll come back and add just a little bit of darker green for a little shadowy detail, maybe, and also for the stems. we go. So as we're letting those flowers and leaves dry a little bit, if you missed it like I missed it, I missed a little spot of blue. I'm gonna get that guy just real quick, just in case. I just noticed that. It's a little piece of kitty fur right there. Other than that, we're going to come back down over here. We're going to let that dry a little bit, and we're going to fill in our petal colors. I'm going to do mine a yellow, so I'm going to wash off this brush because I have some blue on there. I'm going to dry it off, and I'm going to go into some yellow just by itself. You can definitely add a little white to it, make it a little lighter yellow, would be pretty also. And I'm almost kind of dabbing on these little petals. They're so tiny. You can also use that smaller brush. I like this brush because it holds just a little bit more paint. And I kind of like when I paint these petals on how the paint is a little almost gloopy, I would say. Like it builds up, gives you a little texture. So that's why each time I'm grabbing a little bit more paint and kind of encouraging it to have that little bit of paint buildup where you can see those little lines of paint. But if this brush is giving you troubles, don't worry, use your small brush. Brushes are there for you to use, whichever you need. So let's move to our smaller brush next for some of our smaller little spaces. I'm actually going to fill in my nose, my eyes, and my eyebrows next, just so they have plenty of time to dry so I can put those little dots in them. So I'm going to use my tiniest little brush to get a really nice little point with this one. I always like to kind of grab at the edge of my paint and kind of twirl it, twirl and drag. That kind of sharpens up the point of that brush. It's kind of a pointier tip to it, like you're sharpening a pencil. Twirl and drag. So let's fill in our eyes next. We want those to dry the fastest, I would say. I'm going to use just black paint. Whenever it gets a little scratchy, instead of pressing harder, get a little bit more paint on your brush. I'm going to try to go over those little Sharpie lines if I can. Kind of gives it a crisper edge. I'm going to fill in the nose. Now on the little lines of the mouth and on those little almost eyelashy lines, if you have that Sharpie, and I'll include one in the kit here, you can go over your lines with Sharpie, or you could kind of trace the eyes and put those little lashes in Sharpie as well if you want a really, really thin little line. But I'm going to add mine on with black paint while I'm here. So I'm going to trace over my little mouth. And I'm going to trace my eyes, giving her some little eyeliner. For this eye, the top eye, I'm going to trace that line to start, and then I always like to start away how long I want that lash to be and then go in. start away and then go in. And then that way you can control how long that line gets. Because kind of going the other way, sometimes it's a little harder to control how long that line will be. So I'm going to do that first, trace underneath, and then I'll start away and go in. Away and go in. And then we need to give her notorious unibrow, right? So we're gonna start out by filling in that shape first. I like to make those edges a little floofy, so give it some little points, let that brush kind of wisp out. And at any point, if you are making these little lines, and maybe it's getting a little scratchy, if you're feeling yourself want to press harder because it's not filling in all of your canvas, another little trick that I always like to do, especially when I'm doing thin little lines, is actually to add a little bit of water to your paint. So I'm going to try to pull this up close so you can kind of see. So here's my black. And I'm going to dip my brush into water. See, there's kind of like a little drip. Drip. There it is. And so I'm going to mix in that little drip, maybe a couple times, a couple little dips of water into all that. And just kind of the edge of the plate. And it's just a little flowier. Now it's hard to see a little bit. It's kind of makes a nice little like ink almost, right? It kind of flows a little easier. Twist and turn, get that nice little point. And then that's going to make it a little easier filling in any lines with black. When the time comes, that might also help for that little detail around, since it's that nice flowy little wiggle line. I'm going to fill in all my eyebrow, letting it be wispy, letting it be fuzzily. And then I'm going to encourage her little unibrow, put an extra few little hairs there. So Frida. Yay! Okay, so we're going to keep using our small brush. I am going to wash it off and dry it off. And we're going to go in for some little details of yellow. Probably come back and do some more though. I'm going to mix up a light yellow, so wherever you have room, I'm going to get a little scoop of yellow, put that on the edge, get a little bit of white, mix, 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 twirl, get that extra paint off, twirl, drag, twirl, drag. And I'm going to fill in the centers of these. So I'm going to fill in the center of my daisy one. And then over here, and then these two. I'm going to wash off, dry off. And I'm going to go back to my flowers and I'm going to add some red onto my pink. So I'm going to get a little bit of red. I still have my little small brush. And I'm going to do this one first because I want that one to dry first. And I'm going to get a little bit of red and I'm going to fill in all those little squiggles. And then while I have this red, I'm also going to trace the edge of my flower. And I'm gonna put a few little sweeps kind of right in between. There we go. I'm gonna trace the edges of my other petals. Keep grabbing more paint on your brush. Keep it right on the tip of that brush. Keep it on the point. That's gonna give you the nicest, thinnest line. So resist the urge to press harder on it. Just keep grabbing more paint whenever it runs out. Keep a nice light touch. I'm gonna put a few little sweeps of red into the petal. I'm doing 2 on that one, maybe a couple on this one too. On there. I'm gonna do the same thing on that one. Tracing the edges. There we go. So I'm gonna wash off my brush. For my purple flowers, I'm gonna mix up a light purple. So I'm gonna go over here to my purple. I'm gonna scoot a little over. I'm gonna get a little white. Gonna mix white and purple together. Get a nice light purple that I like. Twirl and twist. Drag your brush, get it nice and pointy. And I'm going to, as best I can, kind of wiggle around all those little black Sharpie lines. Don't have to be perfect. That kind of wiggly texture gives it that nice, kind of soft little wiggly petal texture vibe. So there's no right answer on this one. Just kind of follow along as best you can. They don't all have to be super thin. Some parts can be thick, some parts can be thin. Some parts can be lighter, some parts can be darker. This one, I'm gonna follow along my edges a little bit. We don't have that much space on this one. That's okay. There we are. So we're gonna let that dry, and as we do, I did wash off my brush and I dried off my brush. I'm gonna go into this tealy green just by itself, and we're gonna add some little sticks and some little details on our leaves. So let's do our sticks first. So I'm gonna start with this guy over here. I'm going to go right through those little circles. I'm tracing my line. If you want to add any more, you definitely could. Maybe a little guy right there. If you want to make this like a little longer. I'm going to trace this line underneath here. If you want to add extra little vines, that might be cool. Oh, that turned out neat. I like that. And I know my example doesn't have it over here, and we don't have it traced out, but if you wanted to give these like a little connect, add a couple more, that might be cool too. Right. So we have some little stems, little vines maybe, and I'm gonna put a little sweep into my leaf just to give it a little extra something. I'm gonna put a little curve on those little dotty leaves over there. Don't forget those little guys at the bottom. Cool. I think those are all of our little spots. We're gonna go back over here to our flowers. By now they should have had good amount of time to dry, and so a little trick for dots, we're still using our small brush, but instead of the brushy part, we're going to flip it around. We're going to use the handle part. So I did mine in purple. I know they look really dark. You could also do a brown or a black if you wanted. I'm going to keep doing my example color, so I'm going to get a little bit of purple And then I'm going to do a little press and a little wiggle. A little press and a little wiggle to get all those little dots in the middle. While you have that color on your brush, I'm also going to go to these little flowers that have yellow centers on them. And while I have that little bit of purple on my brush, I'm going to add a couple little dots in the middle, like seeds or pollens, perhaps. There we are. Okay, so we're going to let that dry a little bit, and we're going to go to our Frida Cathlo title here at the top. So I'm going to use my little brush for that. I'm going to show you how to do that with paint, but you can definitely go over all those Sharpie lines with some more black Sharpie. So I have that one, I have that black Sharpie included just in case you need it. The watery black is going to be the one to use. So if you need a little bit more or haven't made it yet, I'm going to dip my brush into water and I'm going to add water to that black paint. I'm going to mix it in. You want it to look a little flowier, kind of like ink, but not so much that when you tilt your plate, you get like a drippy. I'll show you what I mean. So if I add a lot of water and then don't mix it in, I'll get drippies. So if you get a drippy on your plate, you're gonna get a drippy on your canvas. So make sure you mix it in, tilt your canvas, or tilt your plate rather. Make sure you don't get a drippy there. Twist and twirl, twist and drag along the edge. And then I'm going to take it slow. If I were doing this kind of on my own at home, I would lay this flat at this point. I would lay it flat on the table or in my lap, and that just gives me so much more control of these fine little lines. So if you have it at home there, I would say lay it flat a little bit. It's going to help. I'm taking it really slow. And I'm getting a little bit more paint as I go. And another little trick that I notice I do, I always start away and then go kind of up or in. So it's a little harder to kind of go down and out. It's a little easier, kind of depending on where your hand is, to kind of go up. And instead of going that way, I would kind of grab that line and then go up, and then I would release it, and then I would grab this line and go up and then release it, instead of going kind of following those lines. Go up, bring this back. So do just little chunks at a time. Okay, congrats. That was a lot of work. Shake out your arm, get loose again. So we are going to let that dry, and then we are actually going to come back over here and we're going to add a few more little details. So I want a few more little touches of white and yellow. I'm going to do that with that same small brush, so I am going to give it a really good scrub and dry it off really, really well. And I'm actually going to add on these little white flowers over here. I'm going to get a good amount of white and I'm going to kind of tap these on. So I have a little bit of white on my brush and I'm going to tap, 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 tap in a little circle. And tap, 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 tap. Almost smush on that paint in a little circle shape. If you want to add any more, you can overlap little flowers next to it. That also looks really pretty. Maybe a couple little guys in between, if you want. There we are. I'm going to wash off my brush and I'm going to dry off my brush. And I'm going to go to these little petals and I'm going to find some of that yellow or light yellow. I'm using that light yellow. And I'm going to put one little swoosh in each little petal. Give a little sparkle. I'm also going to use that same light yellow with the bag handle to make some little dots, and we're going to add some of these little dots over here on this flower, and then lastly, so it'll have a little extra time to dry, these flowers. So I'm going to get a little bit of yellow, that light yellow, that white mixed with yellow, and I'm going to do some press and lifts. So I'm going to press and lift, press and lift. Some little pollens in this flower, and then over here as well, kind of in the middle, work your way out, find your center, work your way out. Here we are, and then lastly I'm going to do one little press and lift in the center of each of these little white puffy flowers, almost like baby's breath. If those need a little extra time to dry, you're trying to add that yellow on there, but it's just really squishing into the paint and not really sticking. Give a little time to dry and then come back to this part. So we're gonna let that dry now, and we're actually gonna come back over here to the little face. While we're doing our little dotting trick, let's wipe off the back handle, and then we are gonna add those little touches of white in the eyes, those little sparkles. So I'm gonna find just a little bit of white, and I'm gonna do one press and lift in each eye. I'm gonna get a little bit more. Yay! I'm also going to scratch a little bit on the nose. I can scratch it into the nose. I'm going to swoosh it a little bit with my brush, kind of fuzz a little out. Fuzzy. If you get a little too much on there, you can always add a little bit more black if you need, just to soften that highlight a little bit. Yeah, like that. And then, if you haven't gone over your whiskers yet, I do have, just in case you need, a Sharpie included. And we can go over our whiskers. If you need to go over the little mouth, this is a good time to go over the little mouth also. Take it nice and slow with the Sharpie. The Sharpie is hard to take off. Take it nice and slow. Oh, I got a little guy there. Just make it bigger there. Beautiful. So I have some whiskers back on there. Our last little step is going to be just that little design all the way around. I did this kind of little scallopy edge, so wavy line. But if you're taking your painting just the way it is, you can definitely leave it like this. You could also do like a thick just border all around, almost framed. That might be really cool. You could do a zigzag. That might be really nice. You could do swirls going around. But I'm going to show you how to do this little scalloped edge, this little wavy line. I'm going to find my smallest brush again. I'm going to wash it off and I'm going to dry it off. And I'm going to use a little bit of my dark blue. I'm going to add a little bit of water to this because I want it to flow a little easier as I'm waving along. So I mixed a little water into this dark blue. I'm going to twist and turn, sharpen up that brush. And I'm going to start on the corner here. I'm going to give it a little curve. And I'm going to take it real slow. I'm grabbing more paint as I go along. So once you have your little scallopy edge all the way around, I'm going to add those little dots just like how we've been doing all the other dots. That's again going to be with the back handle of your brush. I did a red, just kind of bring out maybe the cloak color a little bit more, kind of tie it with that color. But again, you can do any different color that you like. I'm going to use a little bit of red. And on kind of the inside, or I guess that would be the outside part, I'm going to put one little dot in that curve on the outer part. Little press and lift each time. Beautiful, guys. This is gorgeous. Thank you so much for joining us again today with Whimsy Art Studio for our mystery surprise bag. Again, this week, Frida Cathlo. So excited for next week. It shall be a surprise. Have fun doing your activity. And if you take any pictures or videos, please share them with us. We love to see. Thank you so much, guys. We'll see you then.